Good afternoon, everyone. Tom Kaczynski here. It's a little bit past noon on December 6th, 2023. I am here to share another installment of some of my thoughts. It's been a little bit, and you guys have been asking where I am. Let me just say first, some of you know Dana's health has been a little bit of a struggle lately. Don't want to get into all the details today, but prayers are certainly welcome, and you may hear my wife chime in at some point during today's episode. She's here with us, as well as White Cheekers. If you see something that looks like a chicken on the back of my chair who's showing her butt to you right now, which is not what we wanted, but that's what she's doing. We now have a chicken here with us, so that is White Cheekers. She is a porcelain Duclay, in fact, and she's the talent. Just ask her; she'll tell you. She may hear a little bit of chirping, but she's not as bad as Elmer was in the other episode, which I had to delete because it was so bad. All right. So, today I want to start with a concept thought I had. Actually, first, before I do this, I should say social media. On X, at Tom Kaczynski. You guys know how to spell it or you wouldn't be here. And you can find me under Telegram on the same handle if you ever want to chat. Certainly welcome to do that. And the Venmo is CVCPRV if you feel led to give. So, thank you for that. All right, so what was I saying? War in the age of TikTok. We are sitting here this morning, Dana and I were, and we were watching some movies, some different videos on YouTube and other platforms talking about the ongoing war in Gaza. And let's not mince words. Israel is giving the Dresden treatment to Gaza. They are indiscriminately basically carpet bombing areas because they want to clear out the people who are there, who they see as occupying their land. I mean, there are so many videos you can watch out there that they're so terrible too. You know, if you ever want to watch the Friendship song, if you ever want to get triggered and get mad, that they have out there. That's just it's basically advocating genocide. Or, you know, there are these videos you can watch about how, what was it? We were instructed as Christians that our mistake was we should be worshiping all Jews instead of just one, which is just insane. And if this gets this platform in trouble, that's fine. I mean, I don't get many people viewing this, and I'm prepared for that price if that's what happens. That's why you want to go follow us over at Twitter, and I will put that link in the description. I'm sure that it will be in there. Dana was nice enough to collate something. But war in the age of TikTok. So, 20 years ago, when we were fighting enemies in the Middle East who supposedly blew us up, not the financiers who benefited, just like Haaretz is reporting in Israel right now that certain people knew these things were happening ahead of time. You know, certain Saudi families, Mohammed bin Salman, of Solomon. Where do you recognize Solomon from? Do you recognize Solomon as a classical Israeli king name? Do you recognize Solomon as the Solomonic key that's at the heart of Freemasonry? Do you see the names right in front of you? Or do you realize the Ashkenazi are Turkic peoples who happen to be in charge, not the Hashemites in charge of Jordan, who they worry about, who run a lot of these countries, including Erdogan would be in that line, all right? That you would have, the Saudis and other empires potentially, like the Azeris. Anyway, never mind. We're not allowed to talk about history on here. You know how that goes. We're talking about today. And today, most kids don't know their history. Most kids don't even know how to write, which is why Fortune 500 companies are now taking away the requirement for a bachelor's degree for most office jobs. Number one, probably so they can explain away the loss of jobs to AI. And then number 2 and 3, depending on which you believe, is so they can have more diversity hires. Or because they recognize that a college education is basically only a debt marker that people go ahead and put forward so they can have keggers a little bit earlier than the age of 21. Unfortunate, but that's where we are in the equation. But people don't know what's happening. But what's interesting about TikTok is it is a social media platform not friendly to American interests. I believe that. It's Chinese run and Chinese operated, and it serves as both an AI feeding engine and a disinformation campaign. But it's disinformation in the sense that it's not allowing the disinformation our regime puts out there. So people are now seeing what's actually happening in Palestine. And what's actually happening in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, is that people are basically being murdered. And that's what it is. And war has always been like that. And that's just true. Let's not pretend. I mean, I'm sure if you saw images from Sarajevo in 1991 or, Fallujah in 2003 or go back to whatever war, Saigon in the early 70s, this is the nature of war. But war wasn't visible live, real streaming. the Pentagon was pretty good at being in front of that for some of the war on terror, where we got to see the troops marching in heroically, but we never got to see the ugly buildings flattened on top of people part of it. And now we do, and people are mad and they're pissed off about it, and they don't want to support Israel for that reason. And the Zionists simply do not care, because they have that lovely narcissistic sociopathic trait that allows them to kill everyone because they think they're chosen, and the rest of us are goyim. And you can look up what that means. I suggest you do. You could learn a lot. But it's interesting because I've been having conversations with some of the members, who I've been friends with over the years privately. And, some people say, well, isn't Islam the bigger threat in the medium to long term? And maybe it is. If you live in Europe, Islam is going to outbirth you, replace you, and your governments are going to pay for them to do that. Ironically, the same governments that didn't want you to do it, the same governments that have the people they want to replace, are letting that happen. And it may come here to America. We've certainly seen it in certain places. But intrinsically, when I look at the ideologies and the theology of it, I can get along better with Muslims than I can with Zionists, which is crazy, because I do recognize that one is the bigger threat in a lot of ways, because it is the effort to bring civilization down to sort of a lower level in certain ways in terms of what we import here. Not so much over there, because if you actually watch it, I've seen a couple of videos. A guy from Morocco did a really good video on this. He's like, I don't understand Western immigration, because the people we kick out because we don't want them are the ones you're taking. And that was a good point. Even Trump made that point back in the day, back before he decided his son-in-law Kushner got to set up the foreign policy and all the domestic policies. Although it's interesting to watch the people like Lindsey Graham go around and say that we're serious about border security before we give money to Ukraine, which, by the way, is on the verge of a coup once people can decide who the West is going to support. If I was Zelensky, I'd be going to find the best plastic surgeon you can and pick a country somewhere in Latin America, maybe somewhere like Venezuela. Who did?
We did.
America gave Zelensky citizenship.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So, coming soon to Vice City near you. So, if you want to see Grand Theft Auto 6, the guy who will be selling, Kalashnikovs in South Beach might be one of Zelensky's friends.
Yeah, I saw it, and I wanted to click on it because
it's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's an update to me. Speaking of that, before we skip that, since South American news is always very, very interesting to me, we'll see Milei has his inauguration and who shows up there on the 10th. But before that, Venezuela might be going to war with Guyana. And if you don't know where these countries are, you're probably like most Americans, but understand this. This is where the oil is off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Venezuela and Guyana have had a fight over who owns certain territories since about the 1920s, when it was I think it was called British Honduras, if I remember right. But what ended up happening was that the courts of arbitration have ruled that they're Guyanas for years, and then oil was found a couple of years ago. Exxon wants to develop, and now Maduro, the leader in Venezuela, is having brand new maps printed that includes the Essequibo. That's what that area is called. It's about 2/3 of the country of Guyana that is mostly jungle, but which there's oil off the coast of. Now it's being claimed as part of Venezuela, because Lord knows you get resources if you can't run your economy. And it will be a tragedy. We'll see how Brazil and other countries get involved there, but don't be surprised if America doesn't, given the fact that the Houthis in Yemen keep shooting off pot shots into any vessel they like that goes through the Suez Canal. So we're going to need different oil sources, and since we're not allowed to develop our own, we're going to look at doing those in Venezuela. One other thing to keep an eye on the energy front. So they have their COP28, where they decide, what they're basically arguing is none of us should be able to travel anywhere. Carbon capture limits for everyone who doesn't have money to fill up their gas tank, while the jet set crowd goes around to conferences in swanky places like Davos. Fun times for everybody. But one thing that is more interesting coming out of that is that they are all looking in Europe and North America to massively recommitting to nuclear power. Kind of a strange thing, because they haven't looked at it for a long time. One of the things in relation to that I was reading was that Zelensky made a deal with Alexander Soros. You didn't like George Soros? Meet his kid. He's even worse. They're making a deal to turn a lot of the Ukrainian farmland into a uranium and plutonium waste deposit site. So they're basically trying, in my opinion, to make a radioactive minefield separating the West from Russia. Make your judgment about why that is. And knowing these things, when you're wondering why Putin decides to march all the way to the Dnieper and beyond, maybe you'll know. Maybe BlackRock won't get paid. They can take the money from us, but the Russians at least show a little gumption fighting them. But war in the age of TikTok, right? Let's go back to it. So, war in the age of TikTok, we're looking at a situation where people know what's happening and they don't want to support this war. And you see the Rush are Congress, who can't agree on anything, agrees that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, it's good to see that you get good service if you donate enough to the United States Congress. Certainly AIPAC does in controlling the media for years. 6 corporations, 90% of the media has always helped them. But young people don't want it. They don't see it. They're not going to fight for these battles. And if they try to push too hard, I think the people in charge probably realize by now they'll be fighting a war against the people rather than the other way around. And no accident, we now see the Pentagon working to support autonomous AI drones that would be able to fight and kill on their own. And there's any number of creepy, terrible videos about that are waiting to be seen. And that is the future that's planned. So another note I want to talk about is continuing revelations from the New Zealand Pfizer leaks. There was one guy collecting all the data on that, who they're now trying to prosecute because, the whistleblowers are the guilty. I read that Jacinda Ardern, who was the leader there previously, has been trying to get all that data deleted, or had it deleted, so that there would be no evidence of the fact that sickness was being spread. And it has been for a long time. I mean, at this point, if you trust anything to be injected from your body from Big Pharma, you're taking it on your own hands. I understand, and I feel terrible for the people who are dependent on the system. I know that. We know that. We deal with this. My wife isn't healthy, and, frankly, I'm not in the best of health either, despite my best efforts. Nonetheless, this is where things are going in this age. And you look at what's happening and how people are responding. So I have to share a story that's not related to any of this, but that's really got my goat going today, which was being a responsible member of the community, I sometimes drive certain people to a local food bank. And I will say the local food bank is administered by the Catholic Church here, which is the case of most of Aroostook County, by the way. And I will tell you, I am no fan of the Catholic Church or the Catholic persuasion. I see it as a Marian cult. I'll just say it straight up. No point in lying about that. I see this current pope as an apostate who practices all sorts of things that have no resemblance to biblical Christianity or decent living. And but the reflection of the Catholic mindset of being followers, to a church mindlessly has a 2,000-year history of sad tales to be told, and a small one from our neck of the woods. So I go up there with to help some people get access to the food bank because they don't have vehicles. It's poor, we don't have a lot of money up here. But one of the people who I regularly help was sick and unable to attend. So I go, keep in mind, I go every month to grab food for this person. I am known to these people. They see me. This is not a new thing. This is a recurrent thing. And I go to get the food for them, and they have the food already there. It's already prepared because this is USDA funded. That's how they do these things. And it's sitting there in the box. And I'm like, oh, she couldn't make it. Can I grab it for her? They're like, well, you need a note. I'm like, you see me every week. I'm like, I'm like, okay, do you want to call her? They're like, no, she needs to have a note in advance or she can't get this. So she's sick, and she's getting doubly punished to not get the food because these 3 blue-hair 70-year-olds don't care enough to feed a person. And you would think they're Christians, but they're not. I understand. And I'm sorry I'm going to piss some of you off. I don't care. I mean, come out of that church. I tell you, come out of Babylon. Come out of evangelical churches. They're Zionists, too. You're going to have to answer for the theologies you support. But they're over there and following the rules, like little rule followers that they are, like they did in all this county. So when the vax deaths start mounting, Aroostook County's going to be 90% empty, thanks to the fact people took them like communion wafers up here. But, so now she's going to go hungry. So she gets punished for being sick. And she gets punished for not being able to show up on a day where it's below 10 degrees up here in northern Maine, which would be, this is for a person who has respiratory difficulties on a good day, all right? And this is what I dealt with. And I tried arguing, I tried fighting, but you know what? You can't fight the man. You can only watch people who follow rules who are absolutely inane and absurd. And with that in mind, it's one of the reasons why I'm leaving this place. I mean, I will say, not all of New England is like that, and we had better experiences in our time in Greenville. Much credit to them, a much better run food bank down there. But this is the nature of life up here. It's the nature of life amongst the Acadians, against Aroostook County, and it's why, come this time next year, hopefully I'll be deep in Patagonia. That's certainly the plan. If you're interested, reach out, and we can certainly talk about that. But I haven't been saying a lot because, it's a hard time right now. It's a hard time for us. Like I said at the beginning of this, my wife's health and my health are not necessarily the best. Winter has been especially cold this year. It's been very difficult. And it's hard for me to talk about the day-to-day survival things when we live in a life where, frankly, death is something we have to think about. Chronic health conditions, and I don't want to get into the details of it, but I almost did the other night. But death is something I think about a lot. Because odds are at some point, I'm going to face that yet again. My parents are gone, and my wife is not healthy, despite her best efforts. And a system, like many other people, has failed her. Not for lack of effort or lack of research. I mean, we don't get the best doctors anymore because the ones who actually had half a brain left the system. And yet, those are the people who are still allowed access to the system. And I keep outside the system, you all know, as much and as best I can, because it's failing you. And this is the crisis of the age. The systems are failing. The health system has already failed. It got people sick. The propaganda system is targeting the truth tellers, you know. The last platform out there that's allowing truth, you know, this channel's going to get shut down, is X. And X is doing that for one reason, because they want to have people who will be able to be a huge market share of their own. You know, one of the things that was interesting over there is they've added the Premium Plus feature. So if you want to not have to deal with ads and actually get your content boosted, you're a premium member, blue check mark, $8 a month, which is fine. I'm willing to pay that, actually. I'll tell you, I do pay that so that I don't have to deal with the censorship, even though I know anytime I say a word like Zionist, no one's going to see that. It's never going to get boosted unless anyone sees anything, and that's still artificially gamed because there are toxic terms based on certain advertisers. So it's not the global conversation. It's still a more carefully curated conversation. But now they're adding in a Premium Plus feature where for $16 you get access to Grok, which promises to be the only AI that's halfway usable because it's not paralyzed with the toxicity of the woke mind virus, which will make it actually very successful and very popular, but then we all end up on one platform. You see the danger of that yet again, and it's hard because you can't really go to other platforms and compete. People have told me over years, why don't you sell your books off Amazon? Because 80% of the books are sold on Amazon. Why don't you do videos on Rumble? Because 95% of the views are on YouTube. And they know these things, and the monopoly effects are very real. And as long as we're stuck in the world of technology, which we are, some of us do more to stay out of it. If technology went away, it wouldn't be any bane to my life, I tell you that. Certain things I'd miss, but not as many as you'd think. That's where we're at in this story, but the crisis of systems where we're all being funneled into simple control networks is important because we are now seeing the job losses are going to start mounting massively. AI is going to start taking over white collar jobs. The artists and creators, like my buddy Tim, you know, who are facing this digital media, and it's not human. The future is not going to be human. I mean, there's like three options for how this goes. Option number one is the Uncle Ted option. Somebody gets it in their head to go ahead and take power back a few centuries, and then we live that dark age, which a lot of people die up front, but it does buy us time, potentially, to not deal with the AI issues the same way, and maybe we can form a human civilization, or maybe we kill each other all in the chaos and go back further. It's kind of like the throw the random roll of the dice solution. The other option is we follow along with what's wanted for us, and eventually AI replaces more and more people, and that we are fed to soma factories, or after we're fed into meat grinders of wars, we see what happens. Maybe that's the beast system solution. Certainly seems to be what the Bible forecasts, something like that. Looks like some combination of Huxley and Orwell. We've talked about that many times. That's one way. Or third is we just get into a war where a whole bunch of people die and then people wait in the bunkers and they come out and they have their ready-made world with the rest of us floating around as little tribes, you know, for them to pick off one by one. And these are the directions the world's going. I'd like to say there's an alternative, but there's no political solution. Look at the example. I give credit to one congressman, one House Representatives member, Thomas Massey, Republican, Kentucky. He was the only one who voted against the resolution to conflate Zionism with anti-Semitism, and to say it's a hate law that can be punished for you speaking. What good's a constitution if you can't say things that are true? What good is the idea of freedom of speech or identity if there are certain classes that are protected? And most of you who've watched this channel for some time know about the persecution. If you're a Christian, if you're a white, if you're a male, if you're straight, you know, all the groups, if you're a rural person, and no one gave a damn. But you start questioning the people who run Israel, all of a sudden, man, we have a big concern. And so there is a little bit of flop and a little bit of twist, but the kids aren't going to go for it. And you know what? You're not going to convince them because, you know, the funny thing is they're trying the propaganda that worked on the boomers and to a smaller extent, but to some extent, the trauma of the Xers. And they're saying like, oh, these are terrible people and they're threatening you. I was like, dude, our life has sucked for 30 years and now you're going to say you're the threat? You know, you're like, what about inflation? They're like, oh, the economy is doing better than ever. Have you tried buying a cheeseburger lately? You enjoying that $16 Happy Meal? You know, maybe this will accomplish an amazing thing. Maybe Zoomer women will learn how to cook. I mean, honestly, they may not have another choice. Lord knows I knew enough young women in their age who lived on nicotine alone, but crisis of competency, that's what they call it. Systems breaking down. And what are people doing? They're hiding with their heads in the sand. We should organize better. We should get out of the way. Dana and I are trying to do that. People say they're too old, too tired, too committed. Okay. It's fine. But you know the funny thing? It's the Chinese water torture aspect of it. You may be too tired to save yourself while it's easy, but you will try like crazy to save yourself when it's hard. Because the thing is, people say, I'm fine with dying. I'm fine with suffering. I'm fine with accepting things. And to a certain point they are until they have no choice but to fight. Sun Tzu said this thousands of years ago. People will fight when on desperate ground. They're going to put you on desperate ground. Because that's the easier fight for them to win. Because you're not fighting them, you're fighting their minions. And whether they're minions in ideology, and automaton, it doesn't really matter. These are the battles of the future. The only hope, weird as it may be, this side of Kingdom Come, is if so many people just don't care, the system breaks down on its own, and maybe we find some freedom in the anarchy. It gets really bad for a while, but nature reasserts itself. That's my hopeful thought. And I just pray that no one has to suffer too much to see it. Those are some thoughts for today. Kind of dour. Have some personal optimism. Have a plan. Get yourself out of the way. Pick somewhere else to be. People here have been used to living comfortably on a set of lies. A poor truth is better than a rich lie. Trust me on that. Heavenly Father, I just pray for wisdom for those who need it, a blessing on all who listen, health for those who are suffering, and to remember the promise you offered that this will go away and there will be a new Jerusalem awaiting all of us, those who believe. And I just pray that someone who needs to hear that finds some hope in you, and that someone who hasn't found you yet will find their way to you. Always here to help with that. At Tom Kaczynski on Twitter and on Telegram. What's that? No, I have the Telegram up for that. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same. No, that one's the same. And the Venmo, CVC PRV, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739 for White Cheekers, who has turned there. You see, White Cheekers, say goodbye. You talk a little bit. Say buck buck. She's being quiet today. She'll probably squawk at me afterwards. It's the way it always is. Camera shy. That's good for a chicken. All right. God bless each of you. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the program, and I will be back as I am back. And I may post this as well to Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it. All right. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.